Okay, hi everyone. I know there's a couple of people that have joined so far. We've got another 4 minutes to go, so we won't start the official agenda for then. But for those that are on, happy to introduce Doug informally, and he's going to be our filler for now.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, thanks for everybody who's joined today. I'm really excited to be a part of this. It's going to be a lot of fun. For people who don't know me, my name's Doug Collins. I work as a UX UI engineer for a company called Khaki International, but everything I say today is, of course, my own thoughts, opinions, not related to anything that my company would be putting out. So just want to make sure that everybody understands that this is my own personal stuff, but that will make my legal people very happy that I say that. So, but yeah, it's really excited to be here, part of this today. So, in interest of filling up some time before we broadcast, just a few things. You want to follow me on Twitter? That's where I put out most of my stuff. You can follow me on Twitter at Doug Collins UX, DougCollinsUX. I put up something there every day. At the very least, I'll have what I call a UX talk question. You can find that using the hashtag UX talk. That is all about giving us an opportunity to sort of interact and share some best practices on thoughts on different topics, whatever that might be. Today's topics, we're talking about personas and how they're put together and some of the pluses and minuses and pitfalls of them. So if you want to join in on that conversation, I'd love to see you there. You can certainly follow me on Twitter for whatever else I put out. I try to be funny and inspiring and happy and uplifting. I think the world is too small and life is too short to be anything other than just as supportive and uplifting as we can be. Which that's always my main goal. I love to teach. I have a group that I host here in Denver that's we'll be having another meetup next month. It's called New Xers, N-U-X-E-R. Yeah, okay, that was kind of a stretch, but that's what we call the group. It's all about giving information to new UX professionals who are in the design industry. I've been doing UX for a few years now, getting close to about 10 years that I've really been doing UX design. I think actually maybe even a little bit more than that. I certainly don't know everything, but I feel like I have a lot to share, and it's really exciting for me to be able to share in whatever mode or method that might be. So really appreciate anyone that can come to that. We do also live broadcast those meetups when they come through. And again, if you keep an eye on my Twitter profile at Doug Collins UX, you can find those meetups as they come through and participate remotely. We never have a huge audience for that, but it's always great to come along and share whatever we can. I'm not sure when or what topic our next meetup will be, but should be sometime probably mid to late January. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Other than that, the only other thing I have going on right now is I am working on a class about dark patterns for UX design, which will be available hopefully around the beginning of New Year. It is taking me so long to get through that class, but I am so close to being done. Thank you so much for everyone that has sat with me and sat through that. I really appreciate iQuant giving me a chance to hang with them today and talk about some of the things I'm passionate about and also talk about their product a little bit too. Which I think is really very interesting. Certainly my motivation for doing this is just to share my knowledge. I wouldn't be on this broadcast if I didn't think that their product was interesting and helpful and insightful. So I really appreciate them giving me a chance to line everything up. So with that, I think we're about to start. So Chris, you want to lead us in?
Perfect. Doug, I was going to ask when are you going to come to London and do a session with us?
I won't be in London next for a while. The speaking engagements I will be at UX Copenhagen, so at least London-esque in March. I believe that's March 20th. It's 101 days from now, whatever that comes out to be. And I will also working with the possibility of speaking at the World IA Day here in Denver. But if somebody wants to give me a chance to come out to London and talk with them and work with them, I'm there. So maybe we'll have to see what we can line up.
That's a challenge, right? We'll see what we can do. Awesome. Well, look, thank you for the intro. So we're at just 6:01 now. So official start. Thank you very much for everyone that's joined so far. Really excited today. So I'm Chris over here from iQuant over in the UK. And we have, much more importantly than me, Doug Collins, who is joining over from the States. So he's kind of I'll make him blush now, a bit of a legend in the UX world. He's the editor of UX News Mag, really worth a read, certainly a mentor to many. And, he just brings a wealth of knowledge, really kind of, maybe I should choose a different line, but from the front line of UX. He's been there, done that, and probably made the errors and most importantly worked out how to do it properly.
Oh yes. Hopefully
So,
both those things at this point.
so here's your slide. This is him. This is me. I have to do the boring bit now, which is kind of the housekeeping. So it's supposed to be 30 minutes. We did a bit of a run through early this morning, and I think it turns out we both talk a little too much. So might end up being slightly more like 40 minutes, but we are recording it. So out of the 8 key tips and tricks and learnings of the world of UX, if you have to drop out at 7, you can watch the 8th one online. There's around about 100 people joining today, so we are actually muting everyone. But it's okay, you still have a voice in the form of chat. So do send us over your questions and we'll try and answer them at the end, because as I mentioned, we kind of fill the time a little bit. If we don't get to answer your questions live, we will be following up with them directly. And I think, Doug, you're able to do a couple of recordings for answers as well, right?
Right, yeah. Anything that we can't get through to on our broadcast today, certainly leave the question. I will answer everybody's questions. If we don't get through it as part of the broadcast, I will do it on my Twitter profile, again, at Doug Collins UX after the broadcast. But I want to make sure nobody gets left out. So please feel free to leave any questions you might have, and we'll make sure we get them answered.
Awesome. So, as aptly named, it's the 8 habits of highly effective design teams. So the key takeaways that you'll get from the session today is, I guess the challenges that this world that we all work in and love, the challenge that are facing us in the year to come, kind of how to overcome those challenges, and some actual real practical advice and real world examples, not like this kind of top level stuff, but really bring to you some solutions to problems you're probably feeling at the moment. And most importantly, those kind of methodologies and the tools. So the tools in that tool bag that Doug uses day in, day out, and you all do. So without further ado, I will pass over the mic to you, Doug. Away with habit 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Chris. So let's dive right in. Habit 1, creating proactive design, not reactive design. So yeah, really good design is all about creating proactive design. It's all about better products through that proactive design. I really like this quote: "A reaction is instant. It's driven by the beliefs, biases, prejudices of the unconscious mind. A reaction is based on the moment and doesn't take into account the consideration and the effects of what you do or say. A reaction is a survival mechanism oriented on some level as a defense mechanism. It may turn out okay, but often a reaction is something that you regret later." So yeah, I mean, and that really hits the key to the core, especially that last piece. A reaction is something that you regret later is certainly true in the UX world. Proactive design allows us to tackle bigger challenges that are faced by a product's user. And better design is a bigger contribution to our overall success. When we look at UX design, we talk about different organizations being on a sort of different scale, where sort of scale 0 or stage 1 might be your beginning. You have no UX, versus all the way up to stage 5. UX is kind of your thing, sort of what you do. And stages 1, 2, and 3 are really sort of reactive in that the decisions have already been made, and you're working within some very constrained environments. This particular slide is kind of a great example of that, right? So we have 2 different remotes here. We have our Scout remote on the left, which has been designed for absolutely every business use case that the business could come up with. It may even be sort of a existing pattern that we're interested in, right? We try and keep our patterns sort of limited to the things that we're all comfortable with, that we feel good with, versus sort of the remote on the right, which is user tested and accomplishes the same goals and tasks, but does it in a way that's much more efficient, much more user friendly, and much more easy and intuitive to use. So certainly a great example of that there. And when we look at sort of reactive versus proactive design, the more mature you are, the more proactive your design becomes, where we are making and asking questions that inform our decisions, rather than having decisions that inform our questions, is really being sort of the key piece of that from a UX perspective.
So I guess the question in this mind is, how can I make it easier for me to travel in any hotel room and actually be able to use the TV? But,
and with somebody that I had a job once where I traveled about 300 days out of the year. And I can tell you, no remote that out there is intuitive at any hotel. It's one of those things that from a UX perspective, I think the Unusable podcast guys did a really good piece on this as well, and really pointed to some of the problems versus proactive and reactive design. So I'd say go ahead and look through. If you're not listening to the Unusable podcast guys, by the way, they're a great group based out of the UK as well, that are well worth a listen. One of their episodes is focused almost entirely around the design of a remote at a hotel room. Definitely well worth a listen there too.
Awesome.
All right, so yeah, let's hop on to slide number 2. So I'm sorry, habit number 2, forgive me. So starting at the end. So this is all about understanding user goals, right? So what's your design goal? Good design is goal and needs-based. The value comes from addressing goals, right? That's what the value of UX is understanding what our users' goals and needs are. And our success comes from doing it in a way that is better or cheaper than our competition. Identifying goals is really, really hard sometimes. It's a great question to ask, what makes something a goal, right? And when we say good design is data and evidence-based, we take this to mean that we are gathering data and evidence that define user goals that echo what our business is both capable of offering through adaptations of our current offering or future products in development. And much of UX design is a balancing act, right, between what our business can do and is willing to offer and what our user goals and needs are. It can be difficult line to toe, but when it's done correctly, it leads for wins for everyone involved. So certainly something to keep in mind there. Let's take a look at sort of this next slide here, user goals and business goals. So this is kind of a great explanation of sort of where UX sits, right? We have this sort of left side of things, which is the user goals, everything that our users want to do. On our right side, which is our business goals, which is everything that our business expects to get done and sort of what our business is trying to achieve. And that sweet spot in the middle is everything that we should be doing, everything that's absolutely necessary for us to be successful. Sometimes a Venn diagram like this is really helpful when we're trying to figure out sort of what we should prioritize in our roadmap and our product development roadmap, because it allows us to see is something purely a user goal without providing business value, or is it purely a business goal that doesn't provide any user value? Anything that's in that sweet spot should be really highly prioritized. Anything outside of that, you might want to have it take a little bit of a back seat.
I mean, it's interesting you say that. So pretty much the entire client base we have shares this kind of sort of challenge to be able to do this, but a want to do this. So we actually talk about this concept of the 3 Ws, and it's kind of relevant to almost anything you're working on, whether it's kind of software UX, websites, emails, landing pages, even BI platforms. And this concept of, if you can enter into this, whether it's an optimization or a new design, with this mentality of why are they kind of there in the first place? What are they supposed to do or learn? And most importantly, where are they supposed to go next? It kind of really simplifies that kind of huge daunting project of what is this supposed to be and look and feel and on brand and stuff. If you can take away those 3 for every single design challenge you're looking to solve, it typically makes life a bit easier.
Right, absolutely. And that brings up a great point of, sort of the difference between a macro user goal, something that is an overall goal for the user, versus what I call kind of a micro user goal, a goal within an individual page or process. You need to be able to identify both of those to be successful. Certainly if you have the sort of the macro figured out, sometimes the micro gets figured out as well. But being able to identify those questions and properly address them can be hugely, hugely helpful.
Awesome. Number 3.
Yeah. So number 3, UX at first sight. UX at first sight is a bit like love at first sight, right? When you have good UX at first sight, it really makes you kind of get this sort of warm, happy feeling. And that's why one of the tools that I really like to test things is what they call a 5-second test, because it really helps us understand what our users see in the first 3 to 5 seconds of a particular piece, right? So a 5-second test is essentially where you take a individual design, usually something that's either mid or high fidelity, show it to the user for just 5 seconds. And after 5 seconds, screen cuts off, everything's blank. And what's important about this is that you get a very good initial explanation of what's remembered and impactful as part of that design. One part of the visual part of the world is only part of sort of what we see. We only see very small part of what's visually out there. Our eyes are always searching for something that's interesting. Our visual attention moves from point to point over a page. And what catches users' eyes can teach us a lot about our users, right? Depending on sort of what they look at and what they remember, we can get things like their age, their expertise, their motivation from that. So in the past, some of the ways that this has been done is with eye tracking software, which is certainly a great option to do. But iQuant does something that's really interesting with this, where they use AI and machine learning algorithms to create a, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm just getting a notification there, but they use AI and machine learning algorithms to create a sort of simulated eye tracking chart to show you what they would expect the results of an eye tracking study for a particular design to be, which I think is a really cool tool to have and something that is very useful. Let's be honest, not everyone can afford the software or the hardware that allows them to do eye tracking. Not everyone can spend the time to do eye tracking as well. And iQuant is a really great example of how AI and machine learning is coming into sort of the world of UX and allowing us to do our work more quickly and really come up with a good example of sort of what we might expect to see. So I'm really excited about this, and it's something I wish I could use in my job. I work in so for those of you that don't know CACI, which is probably a lot of you, the work that I do is in the defense and intelligence industry. So the software that I create is all about helping us make the world safer by keeping track of and eliminating essentially bad guys, right? And it's kind of something I can't use iQuant in my field, and I really wish I could, because it would save me a lot of time and would be really, really interesting. There are other options out there for eye tracking. And there's a correlation shown that, for instance, you can install mouse tracking software, and that there's a 80 to 90% correlation with mouse tracking and eye tracking. But having a tool that allows us to sort of see the future with AI and machine learning algorithm is tremendously helpful. And I'm really excited to hopefully very soon get a chance to use this on some of my personal projects. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I wouldn't be here talking about iQuant if I didn't think it was a great tool. And I'm excited to at least prop them up a little bit, because I really think it's interesting.
No, thanks for that, Doug. It is a fun space to work in. And what I find really interesting is when we think about the environment as a whole, be it sort of design, UX, and the wider area of our space, there's so much technology around, and it's such a data-driven world. However, the one area which is still very much left as if subjectivity is this kind of pre-live design piece. And you've got these really awesome, accurate platforms like Optimizely, A/B testing tools like Optimizely or Maximizer. Then you've got things like Hotjar, as you mentioned, really cool pieces of kit. But these are tools that are effectively showing you how your design is going to perform. And so what's really nice, and we're actually partners with Optimizely, is we're able to kind of help people analyze what they have created in comparison to, say, the current design, and really be confident that what they're serving into an A/B testing tool is actually better. And therefore, you're leveraging these tools to work out which of the two better designs are performing better than the original. And so it's, we kind of think of it as providing data in a sort of subjective world, if you want to be really creative and dramatic about it.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the great things about UX in general, is that it ends a lot of the sort of endless design debates that you find yourself into, right? When we were doing our dry run through, we were talking about this debate about, what if a business stakeholder says that purple is the new black? And it used to be you would be stuck forever debating this guy going, no, that's not the case. Purple is not the right choice to go for this product. Doesn't match with anything that we're trying to do. Where UX now, especially through things like 3 to 5 second testing, A/B testing, that sort of thing, it allows us to say which things perform objectively better. It's data driven, and it ends those design debates that are really out there. One thing that's kind of important to note about that too, though, is that we follow the data, right? We are not our users. Even as our designers, we might feel in touch with them, but if our data tells us that purple is indeed the new black and performs better, then that's the data that we follow and the direction that we take, and we move on with that.
Absolutely. Move on we shall. So,
yes. Habit 4, designing for everyone. So this is all about inclusivity, right? So inclusive design, we can go ahead and go on to the quote in the next one here. Yep, inclusive design means designing experiences that are effective, easy, and emotionally positive for all customers in a target market by factoring in its variations in age, ability, language, culture, gender, and other traits, right? I'm a very big fan of accessibility, and I talk a lot about accessibility. Inclusive design and accessible design are sort of two inherently different pieces. So for anyone that's heard me talk about accessible design, that's really about targeting people and products that may have some need to provide functionality to people with some sort of disability, whether it's hearing, vision, sight, that sort of thing. Inclusive design is, rather than bolting on something to an existing product, designing from the ground up for every possible variation in age, ability, language, culture, all these other traits, so that everybody is able to use your product well. I really love this chart we have here. What's valuable, what's usable, what's useful, what's desirable, what's accessible, what's credible, what's findable. These are the things that you should be focusing on. And if you have a piece of your product that isn't meeting all of these needs, you really need to question whether or not you need to go back and rethink it, redesign it. This is sort of the basis of inclusive design, is making sure that we're hitting all of these notes for all of our possible users. I like to also point out too that we tend to think of some of these traits, especially when we talk about accessible design, as being things that are temporary, right? Maybe you were born with only one arm, or maybe you're born hard of hearing. And there are 1.3 billion people worldwide with some sort of permanent physical disability. But when you think about it, everybody suffers from some form of disability, even on a day-to-day basis. For instance, when I'm holding my toddler in one arm, I have as many functional arms to use for other things as I would if I had been born with one arm, right? And plus, I've got a toddler arm waiting in front of me too. Or if I'm at a loud construction site, if I'm a construction worker, I'm as functionally deaf to the world outside of me as someone who's born without hearing. And that's just kind of an example from an accessibility perspective of how inclusive design and accessible design aren't just for people with permanent issues, they're for everyone. We design things inclusively and accessibly, and that means that we are designing for not just the people with permanent problems, but for everyone going around the world.
Yeah, and just to chuck a few ideas out there, there's a really cool piece of kit, not ours, called Waze. It's a plugin, browser plugin, and it helps you analyze what you're looking at, typically websites, for color blindness, and it gives you a really cool kind of quick and easy analysis. It's a really nice tool to use. We have some interesting examples ourselves. So within the pharma space, certainly over in the US, there's really strict rules on how visible the marketing elements of a new drug are on a page versus the negative connotations or side effects. And so, people use our tool to work out, what percentage of this area of the screen is standing out and visible, salient in comparison to the others. Same with like the cigarette space as well, actually. So it's really nice measurement tools out there. There's a whole suite of them now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that can be very difficult to sort of understand what some of the considerations and constraints might be. I teach a class on Skillshare that's on accessibility for UX design. And it kind of gives us a guideline, at least from an accessibility perspective, not necessarily from an inclusive perspective, some of the considerations. I'm opening up that class to the first 100 people that want to sign up for it, absolutely free. You can check out, the link is now on my Twitter profile. At Doug Collins UX. Go ahead, sign up for that class, 100% free of charge, just as a thank you for coming and joining the broadcast today, and hopefully to get you started in the right direction in accessible and inclusive design.
Brilliant. Number 5.
Oh, yeah. So let's move on to habit number 5, strategic storytelling, right? So strategic storytelling is kind of an interesting one. Different people learn and communicate differently. Being able to present your findings in a variety of different methods helps ensure that you're presenting your data in the most impactful way. It's all about knowing your audience, and it's all about practice, practice, practice. This little cartoon is really cool. So you've got your ideas of sort of what you want to say is this whole big group of things, and you have your audience and what they're interested in. They may only be interested in a portion of what you have to say. And that middle portion, sort of the difference between what you have to say and what they're interested in, is that relevant piece. And that's really what you're trying to hit. How you get to that relevant piece is going to be different depending upon who you're presenting to. So this is why sometimes experience is really important in this. You get to know your audience, you get to know what they're interested in, what's relevant to them. But also, you know, the different methods that we have for presenting these pieces can be very different. So I want to focus on 6 of these today. So presentations, which could be things like kind of what we're doing here, a presentation in terms of, you know, either some sort of PowerPoint slide, that sort of thing. Journey maps, personas, storyboards, task models, and rich pictures or sketch notes. So these different methods of communication are going to be more impactful for different people. So for instance, in the community that I work in, the defense intelligence community, PowerPoint is very, very ingrained. So they are very used to and very comfortable with and connect very well with PowerPoint presentations. So presentation is one of those things that I do consistently with my group whenever I'm presenting something. Journey maps might be more useful for people that maybe want to engage more and want to have more of a conversation. It's a great way to see sort of how people are flowing through the journey of using your product. Being able to go back and forth and have a discussion on that piece might be better for a group. Personas really make really make users come alive. You give them a face, you give them a name, you give them quotes and attributes. And for people that feel a need to connect with their users, especially for people that might feel very disconnected from their users, can be a very powerful way to present information. Storyboards are great for people that love, well, stories, right? It's kind of like drawing a little mini movie, and it's a great way to get people engaged and interested, especially if you work in a space where storytelling is a big part of the product that you do or what you sell. Task models can be great for people that are very analytical, very logical. They want to understand, okay, what is my goal? What am I doing? How am I going to get from A to B? And then last, rich pictures or sketch notes is something I do a lot whenever I'm taking notes. One of the great things about a lot of these different types is that they allow you to interact with content differently. So with presentations, you get sort of the visual and audio piece of it going along. Same thing maybe with journey maps. You're sort of getting different methods to get the information into you. When you do rich pictures or sketch notes, that gives you sort of another way to add a visual element into your presentation or note-taking. Really increases your memory and retention, and also allows you just to be able to find things a bit more easily. So my notebook, I wish I had it here with me. I don't at the moment, but it looks like an absolute art board, which I'm not sure is always a good thing, but it does make things very memorable for me.
Awesome. So from our client base, you know, we talked a bit earlier about this kind of purple is the new black stuff and sort of stakeholder management piece. So we're certainly au fait with that as well. If you need to do something, I want to say quick and dirty, but quick and efficient with, you know, the highest ROI versus effort put in, you know, what would you recommend?
Well, yeah, you know what, I would recommend that you do things one of 2 ways, right? So you can do whatever is most comfortable for you, or you can do whatever is going to be most engaging for your audience. If it needs to be quick and dirty, though, it has to be comfortable for you, and it has to be most engaging for your audience. That's why it's important for you to be able to do all of these things and have experience in doing them. When you need to put something together quickly, knowing your audience is important, but knowing how to put together one of these tools is also important as well. And it all comes down, like I said, to practice, practice, practice. The more you do these, the more comfortable you'll be, the more experience you have. And then you end up almost having templates that you can go back to and sort of change and edit and rearrange depending upon the project that you're doing. So sometimes you might be in, you know, I need to get things fast out the door super quick, and you're picking out something, going through it and using it. But other times when you have more time, you might make, you know, a presentation and some journey maps, or you might do some personas along with storyboards. Even if you don't use those journey maps or personas or task models or sketch notes, it gives you experience creating them. And that's going to be helpful for you down the road when you find yourself in an area where they'll be useful to you.
Brilliant, thanks. Okay, number 6.
Yes, cross-functional synergy. I love the word synergy. It's just, it's so exciting and energetic. I know that it kind of got a bad rap there for a little bit, but it really is, um, exciting. And we're talking about, in this case, specifically synergy between UXers and developers. So look, collaborating with your development team isn't always easy. There's been some thought about, do we pair UXers and developers? There's sort of mixed reviews on that. But in the end, we're nothing without the development teams that implements our work. And being able to communicate with our developers is an essential and undiscussed skill in the UX world. One thing I hear a lot is a question, should UXers be able to code what they do? And I don't think that's important. It is important to have enough technical skill to be able to say, yes, this is something that we can do that's technically possible, or to understand the technical considerations when you're proposing a design or design changes, whether or not it's going to make things overly difficult, spot edge cases, that sort of thing. But you don't need to know how to code entirely. And that's one of the reasons why I really like this diagram here. So we're showing the difference between designers and developers. Designers, all about identifying client goals and needs, understanding what's possible, resolving usability concerns, where developers are addressing browser limitations. They know how to code the design. How to do the troubleshooting technical issues. And that sweet spot in the middle, again, I love the sweet spot in Venn diagrams. It's all about staying current and asking questions, right? If we're able to stay current in our technical knowledge and ask appropriate questions of both our users and our developers while we're going through the design process, it really makes a huge difference. The more you can keep your developers involved with the design process, the better off you're going to be. Developers who understand the work that you've done, why you've done it, and the results that you've done are going to be infinitely more skilled and more able to create your designs without having to ask too many questions of you once you've gone through that handoff process. So certainly is something that's tremendously important, and one of those pieces that I really can't understate enough. And let's take a look. I think our next slide is tips for successful collaboration. So a few tips here. Keep developers in the loop with a complete sitemap through design specs so the details aren't lost by the time the project is ready for integration, right? So the more information you can give them, the more specific you can be. That makes sure that we're not losing those details. If we're keeping them up to date on that as we go through our process, the better off everyone's going to be. Create a robust style guide for each project. Ideally, you should have a sort of a macro style guide for your entire product. But if you could create a style guide per project, you can include the global patterns and the other small sort of reusable components that you're using just for those projects, so you can be very, very specific. Making the handoff to the development team a breeze by providing clean and organized PSD or sketch files. Use artboards to set up your mobile, desktop, and comps side by side. So whatever tool it is that you're using, whether it's PSD, Sketch, InVision, Balsamic, that sort of thing, doesn't really particularly matter, as long as they're clean and organized and are really very specific for your development team. Because remember, you're dealing very often with people who are very, very logical and looking for those very sort of straightforward thoughts. Three things to always include in your website comps. So grid and margin guides, layer comps to show interactive elements, and callouts for specific guidelines using the notes panel, right? The more information you can give, the better off they'll be. But again, like I said, the more that you include your developers in your design process and keep them in the loop as you're going through and doing your research, doing your everything from your user interviews to your lo-fi mockups, medium-fi, and high-fidelity mockups, the easier it's going to be for them to take that project, not so much as a hard handoff, but it almost becomes organic, that they say, okay, I understand what we're doing, and they feel comfortable starting work at their own pace on their own time once your work's been completed.
Awesome. That's a useful takeaway set. Quick note for everyone online. So I know that we're at the half-hour mark yet, but we've got two quick, brilliant points left. So if you can hang on, awesome. If not, just remember when you watched online, just get to that 30-minute point, and you'll only have about 5 minutes left to watch online. What a perfect segue into allocating time.
Absolutely. As someone who's taking you over your time to learn, I apologize about that, but it is something that is tremendously important. It brings me to this one thought that I always try and intonate with people, is that to become a UX professional is to commit to a lifetime of learning. So UX isn't a trends-based industry. The way and the psychology behind how humans interact with computers the psychology doesn't necessarily change, but the tools, the processes, and the techniques that we use to study and learn from that do change. So it's important for us to be able to take the time that we need to commit to that sort of lifetime of learning. So we always need to be looking for new tools, new techniques, new frameworks. Don't wait to hear about them. Go out and find them. It can be doing things like trying to write your own articles, whether it's for Medium or just for your own personal purpose. Writing can be a great tool to help you learn. It can also be going out and looking for new products like iQuant, which I hadn't heard of before they got in touch with me, and I wish I had, because it's a really cool product. So whatever it might be, take the time, take those courses, teach, learn, and spend, make sure that you have that time built into your process to learn something new. I try and learn something new every day, and I always say that you should learn something new every day. So build that time in. Actually, if you have to, take, actually your calendar, section off half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it might be, even if it's just 5 minutes, and say, this is the time that I'm going to take for me to learn something new today.
It's interesting. Someone else was saying that, a bit like in the developer world, people think that you have to retrain like 4 or 5 times over the entire career because the languages they have to work with change so frequently. And that UX is somewhat similar to that. So although the way that the brain works isn't going to change, or certainly not over our lifetime, the tools and tricks and quick wins to make you as efficient as possible at your role are ever changing. And so, yeah, absolutely. Keep reading.
Yeah, 100%. And you've got some great tools here that I'm included on this. That's great. As far as different options for our UX friends looking to learn some new things. So there's my website, denveruxer.com. There's also Bogue World for Paul Bogue's web show, podcast, great podcast, as well as Making UX Work, which is by Joe Natoli. I was on episode 5 of Making UX Work. This is all about the people working on the front lines of UX, doing the day-to-day work and sort of their experience, how they got into it, what their job is like, that sort of things. Also, Think First from Joe Natoli. I cannot recommend anything by Joe Natoli enough. He is not only a superb teacher, but he's one of the best human beings in the UX world right now. Certainly anything you can pick up from him will be extremely knowledgeable and extremely effective. The Interaction Design Foundation, an excellent tool for people, especially if you're learning for a tool that will give you some self-learning options. Smashing Magazine hosted the first UX conference I ever went to, Smashing Magazine in San Francisco, 2017. I love everything about them, especially their conferences are great. Conversion Rate Experts, UX Magazine, UX Booth. I recently wrote an article for UX Booth and I've been reading them for some time, so that was very gratifying. Evil by Design is a great book on sort of dark patterns and that sort of thing, which is related to my dark patterns class, which I've been trying desperately to get done, and hopefully we'll be done with sometime here in the new year. So all some really wonderful tools, but the great thing about UX is that there are so many wonderful different pieces out there, whether it's podcasts, everything we have here, the Unusable podcast I mentioned before, User Defenders podcast, really great options to reading, writing. There's so much out there, and there's no reason why you can't go out and find something new to learn every day.
Amen. And on to the last but not least.
Right. Valuing the outcome, not the process, right? So we get very, very caught up in the process in the UX world. We talk a lot about what's your process. And I think even the question I posted today is, what's your process for creating user personas? But one of the biggest traps is focusing on the outputs over the outcomes. So discussing what to build before clearly defining its purpose. Jacob Nielsen said, a wonderful interface with the wrong features will fail. So even if you build the thing well, it won't succeed, which is a great example of that. So look, UX design processes should be inherently flexible to bend to the variables of project size, goals, and timelines. The business reality of working in a UX design team means that we will rarely, if ever, be able to use the same processes for every project. While UX teams should have an ideal state for their work, and absolutely it's 100% necessary to have sort of that ideal process down, don't lose track of the end goal, which is creating a web that is more usable, user-friendly, and better than it would be without that process. Really, that's what our goal is in UX. Certainly we exist to make the world slightly better through the power of design. and of course, also make our companies a little bit better for it as well. So certainly something that's tremendously important there. I like this flow here. So we talk about outcome-led design, right? Focusing on what the outcome of that design should be. That leads to more beneficial aspects to the customer and powerful marketing. So we tend to think of marketing and UX as kind of being sort of separated, and they are, but they do both fall under the CX, the customer experience umbrella, and they are absolutely related in a lot of ways. And better UX, better marketing is always going to lead to increased product usage and sales, which again, we are the only voice of the user in most of our organizations, but if our businesses aren't making money, we don't have a job and users don't have a product. So in the end, that goes back to sort of that balancing act between user goals and business goals and all that. It's all interrelated, but great thing about UX is that it gives us the power to make everybody happy, the users, the business, and of course, ourselves.
Well, you did use the cheesy line that UX at first is like first love. So, well, look, we're going to have to skip the questions because we've taken up way too much time. But we will come back to all of you with the questions you've sent in. Likewise, maybe take a quick screenshot. This is the way to get in touch with Doug. He's got a 7 billion gazillion Twitter followers, so become another one of those. And likewise, if you want to know anything about how iQuant works, learn a bit more, although this title says I'm a horrible salesperson, we'd just love to chat. So get in touch. Thank you, everyone, and especially big thank you to you, Doug. Speak to you soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks for having me. And everyone, certainly hope whoever you are, whoever you might be, thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, guys. Thanks a lot.